With the panel, let me bring them in. With me now, CNN political analyst Kirsten Powers, who's also a columnist for USA Today. Trump supporter Betsy McCoy is back with us, used to be lieutenant governor here of New York. CNN commentator Bakari Sellers, an attorney who served in the South Carolina State House, and CNN's senior reporter for media and politics, Dylan Byers. Great to have all of you. And Kirsten, I'm turning to you first here because it will be, if we're talking, looking ahead to the news conference that Mr. Trump will be holding on December 15th. It'll be about 18 weeks since he's done this before. So I'm going to assume that the man's going to take questions. We hope. What would your biggest questions, the biggest unanswered questions be for him?
Well, I mean, one of the things I have actually been wondering about is the choices that he's in terms of foreign policy, because he is somebody who was extremely critical of really the mainstream Republican foreign policy establishment during the election, sometimes making arguments that are even to the left of Bernie Sanders against the Iraq War. And now he's looking at people like General Petraeus, for example, for top post in his administration, even though Petraeus was the architect of the surge, for example. And Mitt Romney, who's certainly within the mainstream of a more interventionist foreign policy. So is he expecting that these people are going to follow his lead, or is he going to be following their lead? Because he really is surrounding himself with people who I think do not reflect the views he expressed during the campaign.
So that's a great question that I'm sure he'll be posed.
Yeah.
And Dylan, let me go to you as someone who I'm sure would like to get a question into Mr. Trump. I think just on media, the way he's been using Twitter, right, and how he's been dropping news on Twitter, whether it's the holding true on his campaign promise of working with Carrier and keeping some of those jobs in the U.S. Or maybe detracting from what he would like us to be talking about and talking about flag burning and loss of citizenship. But then there was this sound from his good friend Newt Gingrich. Here it was.
I think the worst thing he did was the tweet the other night about illegal votes. I mean, the presidents of the United States can't randomly tweet without having somebody check it out. I mean, it just it makes you wonder about whatever else he's doing. It undermines much more than just a single tweet.
But he's also said if he were Trump and in the White House, he would just totally and completely ignore the press corps. So, Dylan, do you think that once he's president, he will just continue to ignore, folks like you and me and use Twitter to make news?
Well, to a degree. Look, I think Donald Trump is Donald Trump, and I think the President of the United States can randomly tweet out whatever he wants if that president is Donald Trump. Yes, he will continue to do that. There's no doubt that he will continue to do that. There's obviously a great deal of hand-wringing among journalists, among reporters, among news organizations about how you handle those tweets. Look, what I think I would say is tweets are necessarily vague. They're only 140 characters long. We're going to need more access to Donald Trump. We're going to need more clarity on not just what he's thinking, but also on some of some of the deals that he's made, the Carrier deal, his plan to separate himself from his businesses, what that actually looks like, how that will actually pan out. And for all this sort of hand-wringing about Donald Trump using his Twitter account to get his messages out, I mean, the ground rules, as I see them, haven't fundamentally changed. The ground rules are you need to press politicians on what they say and what they're going to do. And when someone just goes out there and makes a statement, you need to follow up and you need greater clarity. And I think that's why Donald Trump knows he has to give a press briefing about this plan to separate himself from his businesses rather than just throwing that out there in a tweet and expecting that the American people are going to be okay with that.
Right. And Lieutenant Governor, I'm sure his Trump's hard supporters, love the idea that he's saying, I'm not, filling the media in on everything. I don't need them for everything. I'm sure they love that. But the thing is, isn't it a little dangerous when he drops legitimate news on Twitter one day, but then baseless claims about, millions of people illegally voting for Hillary Clinton in another?
Maybe, but I'm really focusing much less on all this kabuki dance about Donald Trump and his relationship with the media.
That's how we get news. That's
true, but Americans are watching.
Talking to us.
Americans are watching what he's actually done, and look at how the world, America and the world, are responding to this transition so far. 3 financial markets have hit new records in the last week. The dollar is stronger than ever. Consumer spending, as we enter this holiday season, is shooting up. Great news for merchants as well as families. By every single measure, people are responding directly to what he's doing. These picks, for example, to me, are a dream team to jumpstart the economy. And look what he did with Carrier. He's not even president yet, but he picked up the phone, and as a result, there are 1,000 families in Indiana that owe mortgages and have to put food on the table for their kids, and suddenly they're going to have a good holiday because they haven't lost their means of financial support. They're living. That is terrific news.
It is incredibly encouraging
for
those 1,000 families. But Bakari, you know, and listen, Betsy McCoy makes great points, all true, but at the same time, you know, it's a little dangerous with the Twitter.
Well, I mean, they're all true, but she also left off one fact, that the President of the United States, and the reason that we're seeing consumer confidence, the reason that we've seen unemployment rate dip, the reason that we've seen the markets, skyrocket is because the President is Barack Obama. And we've been seeing that over the last 8 years as his presidency, and Donald Trump will inherit an economy that is growing. That's first and foremost. But yes, I mean, Dylan brought up a good point. You know, the Carrier deal, we're very thankful that those 1,000 individuals get to keep their jobs. The question is how. The question is, you know, if Barack Obama would have done that, is he being questioned about choosing or picking winners and losers? What were the subsidies? What were the deals? If Carrier got it, does every other company in the United States get it? When you talk about these conflict of interest, things you just can't do in a tweet. Yes, he's simply saying that he's going to eliminate himself from the operating, but I own various businesses, and although I'm not in the operation of, I still reap the benefits, and I still know what's going on in those companies. You know, you're talking about a conflict of interest where literally in Washington, D.C., he will now be the boss of his landlord for his hotel. Or you look at Trump Tower, where their largest tenant, state-controlled Bank of China.
Let me jump in. You mentioned Trump Tower, but let me hit pause because it's really important to see all these different faces who are rolling through that lobby in Trump Tower. Linda McMahon just stepped up to the microphone. Do we have her?
Hi, how are you?
Tell us how the meeting went.
The meeting went great. It was really nice to be up, and I was honored to be asked to come in. Anytime I think the President-elect of the United States asks you to come in for conversation, you're happy to do that. We talked about business and entrepreneurs and creating jobs, and we talked about SBA, and so we had a really good conversation.
What about a job for you, man?
Well, that remains to be seen.
Did he offer
Stay
you
tuned.
anything?
Stay tuned.
Is there something you'd like?
Offer you a role?
Thank you.
Okay, we just always want to dip in and see who's there. Speaking of the different faces, and Bakari, I'm just going to move on, and Kirsten, ask you, you know, on the Romney note, and let's talk about the steak, the big dinner, yeah, you know, and John George, and we know that the Trump loyalists have been calling for, you know, Gingrich and Huckabee and others have been calling for Mitt Romney to really issue this full-throated apology for what he has said about Trump in the past. And so I think what's so significant is that just after dinner, what Romney said, the note, he didn't say, "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
But he came really close.
Yeah, well, it was quite an about face if you compare the way he was speaking about Donald Trump before. And the question I would have for Governor Romney is what changed? Right. So what's different? And what he basically seemed like he was saying is that Trump won, and that's such a big accomplishment. And so he was able to do something that Romney wasn't able to do. He was able to win. But how does that change all the charges of him basically being a scam artist and a fraud and all these other things? Romney hasn't addressed that. Now, I've talked to people who are close to Romney, and they say Romney's a patriot. He believes he could help Trump, and so that's why he's doing this. And he thinks it would be better for him to be by his side than not. But I think that it does just raise some questions about was what Governor Romney said before true or not.
Okay. And Kirsten and Dylan and Bakari, thank you so much. Again, 4 contenders, the final 4 for